Welcome on into Green Couch Chats with Miss Miami. I'm your host, Mariluz Cook. Today I'm joined by Miami Heat original Tony Fiorentino, who has been with the team since 1988. In our conversation, he outlines the importance of youth empowerment through an anti-bullying campaign that he's implemented in local schools with the Miami Heat, the importance of balancing mental health and mental toughness, and some of his best mental and physical health tips. Mariluz Cook, Miss Miami here, now joined by Tony Fiorentino. So Tony, what I find really interesting about you is that you have a background in guidance counseling and psychology and teaching. Now, I mean, you were just teaching 2 years before you joined the Miami Heat as an assistant coach in 1988 under Ron Rothstein, and then you're serving as an assistant coach. You move on to color commentary, and now you're the director of junior Heat camps, and you've implemented an anti-bullying campaign. How would you say that you've kind of found yourself coming back to your roots in your current role now?
Well, it is interesting. You know, I was a teacher in my hometown of Mount Vernon, New York, and I majored in psychology and sociology in college, not knowing that, you know, what am I going to do when I get out? Because what do you do with those majors? But it all worked out because once you start teaching in New York, you have to get a master's degree within 5 years. That's the law in New York, which is I think it's really cool because it makes teachers continue their education while they're teaching. And you learn different ways to communicate with kids and different things. And so I got a master's degree in guidance counseling. And I was going to be a guidance counselor. I got an MS plus 15. And I stopped because I would have had to give up being a basketball coach as well as a teacher. You know, I would teach, and then I had to give up basketball to be a counselor, and I didn't want to do that. So I stopped going to school. But I did have the master's degree in guidance counseling. And so after 15 years of teaching history and being the basketball and baseball coach for some of those years, I moved on to college for 2 years. And then I came with Ron Rothstein to the Miami Heat in 1988 when we started. We were the 2/3 of the original coaching staff. And I was an assistant there for 11 years, the last 4 years on Pat Riley's staff. And all the while running basketball camps. And then when Pat Riley came, we started the Miami Heat basketball camp, which is now called the Junior Heat Camp. And so after being an assistant for 11 years in the NBA, 3 years with the NBA, WNBA team that we had, the Miami Soul, I moved into radio for a year. And then for 15 years, I was the broadcast partner of Eric Reed. And then a few years ago, I got reassigned to work in the community, which is that full circle you're talking about, because now we wanted to get a more profiled goings on basketball wise in the community with the Junior Heat program. And it started out as clinics once a month, maybe during the season when the team was away on the practice court. We have 8 weeks of basketball camp over the summer. We have a winter camp. We have a spring camp. And I would direct all of those. But what I also wanted to do is we implemented, when they told me we were doing this, that I wanted to implement an anti-bullying campaign, which is just basically trying to teach kindness and put more emphasis on kindness. One of the things I love about our camps and about our clinics is that we don't just teach basketball and basketball skills. We teach life skills. And my favorite quote I give out a quote every day at camp. In fact, I was working on it today because we're going to start camps on July 5th at the arena. And one of my favorite quotes ever is what Magic Johnson said. And he said, you don't have to be magic to be special. You're already special. You're you. It's a great quote because how many kids hear that they're special? And when you tell a kid, look, you can't imagine how many people there are in the world. There's 7 billion people in the world. And there's only one you. So that's pretty special. There's nobody like you. Okay. And so we try to raise the self-awareness of themselves, because that's where it all starts, the image that you have of yourself. And when you can start being kind to yourself and not start feeling better about yourself, you can be kind to other people. And so that's where it comes in. And in camp, we play some games sometimes where we'll say, okay, I want you to go home today and do something kind. Come in tomorrow and let me know what you did. And the kids would come in the next day and say they did this or did that. And we get them thinking a little more on the lines of being kind to people rather than, like we see in society, it's mostly kids who like to bully other kids. And they don't really understand how they're making the other person feel. They're feeling bigger about themselves when they do something like that, and they're playing to their colleagues, so to speak, their peers, but yet they don't realize how the other person feels. And so we've gotten into that more in the camps. We've gotten more into it by going into a lot of middle schools and having maybe a 35, 40-minute session with about 40 to 50 kids. We bring one of the Heat championship gold balls with us. We give some giveaways, and Julian Sanchez and Santi Echeverria, they come with me. They start it, and then they can take pictures with the ball. I wear the championship ring. They can take pictures with the championship ring, and we talk about kindness and about how they can just express themselves that way. So I have come full circle. I really miss announcing what Eric Reed, but I also enjoy what I'm doing in the community.
And what you're doing is so special. I mean, kindness is so important when it comes to combating bullying. And just like you talked about, that self-awareness is really important. So it all coming back to kindness is so important. Now, I want to talk about your website, not just basketball.com. On there, you have Tony's tips. And I love that. That's my favorite part of your website. You have advice and quotes. And there's one that you have from Pat Riley. It says, great effort springs naturally from a great attitude. How important is attitude and approaching life with a spirit of gratitude when it comes to having a healthy mindset?
Well, it's a great question, because what's an advantage that I have is that the Miami Heat team is known to have great culture. And what we explain to the kids about that in camp, and when we speak to them with the anti-bullying stuff, what is culture? What does that mean? And basically what it means is that you're a part of a group, and it's not an individual thing on your part. You're doing what's best for the group. And so having a good attitude when you go, for example, you may think you should start, but somebody's starting ahead of you. How do you feel about that? Now, you can feel maybe you're better, or you feel you should start, but you know what the coach feels it's best for the team that person starts and you come off the bench. So you accept that, you acclimate yourself to a new situation, and you do the best you can when you're in there, and you stay ready when the coach calls your number. And encompassed in all of that, Coach Spoelstra also talks about, look, you don't just start preparing to play basketball, or you don't start preparing to be a success when you walk into the gym. You've got to have a good diet. You've got to eat well. The Heat has a nutritionist. You've got to sleep well. You've got to carry yourself off the court as a winner, as you would when you walk through the doors to practice. And so it's all encompassing. And this is what we explain to kids. The parents love this when we have camp. When I tell the kids, all right, you're a basketball player this week. You got to go to bed by 9 o'clock. All right. So if you get up at 7 in, you're getting a good 10 hours of sleep to come to camp and play basketball. And we also say to them, remind them and say, look, when you get up in the morning, have breakfast. That's important, because you're going to be running all morning before you have lunch. You're going to be exerting more energy than you normally do than when you're not in camp, I would imagine. But you got to thank the people that make the breakfast for you. So we had two cute situations with that. One situation, a boy walks in 8:30 in the morning a few years back, and he's standing there with his mom. I said, what time did you go to bed? He goes, 9:30. I said, okay, that's good. Did you have breakfast? Yeah, what'd you have? It had eggs. He goes, who made it? Your mom. I said, did you say thank you? Stone silence. So finally, after a little bit, he looks up, he goes, thanks, Mom. Okay, so, and then there was another time when I said to the kid, did you have breakfast? He goes, yeah. I said, who made it? He goes, McDonald's. We stopped at McDonald's on the way. So, but they get the message, and the parents are appreciative of it. We give out a quote every day, as I mentioned earlier, which I really, I ask the kids to look at the quote, understand it, look up who made the quote, and then we'll discuss it tomorrow morning when we meet, that sort of thing. And then we also ask them to do a kind deed. So all of this culture that comes from the Heat, and how they play for each other, and how they got to fight through adversity. Okay, where you're losing a game you shouldn't lose, or maybe you're down 0-3 in a series with Milwaukee. How do you bounce back? Ooh. You got to keep everything in perspective. It's not the end of the world. And, we have some quotes where coaches like Coach Riley, Coach Krzyzewski, and people like that talk about Coach Krzyzewski, the coach of Duke. They talk about how you learn more when you lose than when you win. And then, Coach Calipari's got a good quote. He goes, when you play the game, you either win or you learn. No such thing as losing. You either win or you learn.
That's true.
So these are the types of things we try to teach the kids through the kindness program that we have, through the camps. And again, it's very easy for me to make examples of the Heat culture to them. And on my website, I have 40 tips. Some of them are about basketball, how to improve as your shooting and dribbling and passing and all that stuff. But there's also a lot of subtle things on there. There's a kindness one. There's a lot of quotes in there. There's a lot of pictures that are very, that especially Heat fans will love, because there's pictures of LeBron and Dwayne Wade and Chris Bosh and myself with Eric Reed. And, there's all kinds of pictures on there. And you learn a lot by looking at that. It's good for coaches. It's good for parents, and we have a anti-bullying page that they can allude to. I especially like the tips we give parents. I think parents sometimes get too caught up when they're at a game with their kid and they're trying to coach the kid from the sideline, and they're getting upset with the coach. They're getting upset with the referee. They don't realize that kids don't really listen to parents. They emulate their actions. And so you've got to understand that your actions are going to be copied by your son or daughter when they're in that contest. So you've got to control yourself, and you've got to be able to help the coach and help the situation rather than be a detriment to it. So there's advice on about that on the website, notjustbasketball.com.
It is an awesome website. Highly recommend
Thank you.
that our viewers check it out. It really is great. You've done a great job putting that together.
Thanks. It got me through the pandemic.
Oh, okay. That was a pandemic project.
I did. I had the website before, but I only had 6 tips.
Oh, okay. Well, we've expanded.
So I totally revamped the whole thing, and just added tips after that. Just kept me busy every day when you were stuck in the house. Yeah. And so it became very, very productive to do that, because it takes a lot of time and effort to write it right and then edit it and then get it back and then do it again, get it straight and all that stuff. And it just got me through months and months of the pandemic. So it was a very positive thing that happened out of that.
That's good. I think that's really important too. Just looking at the pandemic, finding something that gives you purpose is so important. So I'm glad that you had that, and then that it's a benefit to so many other people who are able to take a look at it. That's awesome.
Yeah. I was able to get together with GoDaddy and get that done.
There you go. Okay. What a collaboration. Now, Tony, looking back at your time as an assistant coach, you and I were just chatting a few weeks ago about traveling for work. And, you're traveling to different time zones and you're going out ahead of the team, scouting opponents. When you're doing that, right, we strongly believe that there's a mind-body connection. What were you doing to keep yourself mentally and physically healthy during those times?
Well, it's a great question, because a lot of people don't talk about this, but I think you've got to be able to prepare, and you've got to budget your time. You've got to know what's important. Okay. One of the important things that we teach at camp, we just mentioned a little bit about getting enough sleep. Mm-hmm. I thought we had that quote that I like to give out by Tom Brady. It's even more appropriate now because now he's a champion again, right? Proper sleep has helped me get to where I am today as an athlete, and it is something that I continue to rely on every day. And we know what a help nut he is. Mm-hmm. And he's able to perform at a high level at age 45 in a game where you have very few people playing football into their late 30s, and he's still at the top of his peak. Okay. And so I think when I was traveling and being ahead of the team, the first year we were in the NBA, we were in the Midwest division. So that meant we went to the West Coast 5 or 6 times. Normally you go 3 times during the season as an East Coast team. We went 5 or 6 times. We were on the road a lot. And so, and then with me being an advanced scout also to see what the other team's doing, I even traveled a little more than the team did, because I would go ahead to the city, or I would go to different cities and scout. And you've got to be able to budget when you're going to get your sleep, how much time you need to get your sleep. There's no way you can go scout a game, an NBA game, and see two teams playing and not be alert. And so that has a lot to do with how well you eat and how well you sleep and what time you go to bed. When I was a high school coach, I used to tell my kids all the time that I was coaching, that going to bed at 1 o'clock in the morning and getting up at 9, 8 hours sleep is a lot different than going to bed at 11 and getting up at 7, even though it's 8 hours.
Mm-hmm.
It's a different 8 hours. So you try to get to bed earlier, get your sleep. The later you go to bed, the harder it is to be alert and be physically fit the next day. That's a fact. And so we try to get that through to the kids, like we do in the camp, get to bed by 9 o'clock, that sort of thing. And so when you're traveling and when you're doing whatever the work is, I think a lot of people are caught up in their work because they got to make a living. They got to make some time for themselves. They got to decompress.
For sure.
You know, the woman that works with the heat, with food and all that stuff, she was talking about, and you should try to get 35 minutes of cardiovascular a day. Now, for a lot of people, that's impossible, but keep that in mind that if you could do it 5 days a week, even 4 days a week, mm-hmm. where you put aside a half hour and go to the gym and be on the bike, be on an elliptical, doing a VersaClimber, go for a walk for a half hour, walk a mile or two. Not only is it good mentally, but it's good physically, obviously. And that's what people are maybe got into more during the quarantine. Mm-hmm. Okay, because you couldn't travel that much. So I know a lot of people that got out and said, I'm going to walk for an hour today, mm-hmm. or I'm going to ride a bike today for an hour. I had a knee operation, so I worked the elliptical. I did 5 miles this morning on the elliptical. It was 30 minutes. So it was great. I got all this. And, so if the whole thing is starting it, once you start it, and once you get a lifestyle that is healthy and productive, then you're getting it all done then.
Lifestyle. That is what is so important. Having that healthy lifestyle mentally and physically. So
right.
Good for you, getting in your 5 miles this morning. No, Tony, so there's a story that I've heard you tell about Pat Riley and the ice bucket. And for those who may not really understand heat culture, I think this really puts it into perspective. Can you tell us that story?
Sure. There's been all kinds of versions of this, but I lived this version, so I know this is what happened. Pat Riley, when I was on his staff for 4 years, he liked to use real life situations to explain things to the players and then make it an example of how they should perform or how they should do. Well, I showed them a story of a boy who was on a football team, high school boy. I think it was high school boy for 2 years, couldn't win a game. And so the old coach that retired was sitting on a wheelchair, on a rocking chair on a little hill. And he was sitting on his porch, and the boy walked up to the porch and he said, Coach, he goes, I need to ask you a question if I can. And the coach said, of course. He said, we haven't won a game in 2 years. Why can't we win? And so he said, come with me. And he walked the boy down to the lake. He said, I want you to kneel down. He knelt down and he took the boy's head and put it under the water. And he kept it there, and he kept it there, and he kept it there. And all of a sudden he pulls the head up and the kid goes, he says, when you want your last breath, when you want to get that last breath, when you want that breath that badly, that's when you'll win. Okay. So when we had the lockout in the 98-99 season, the work stoppage, when we had the work stoppage in 98-99, they went back to playing 3 nights in a row. They have done away with that because it's not healthy for guys to play 3 nights in a row. So they went back to 3 nights in a row, and we had won the first 2 games. Now we're playing the 3rd game on the road in Detroit. So we're in the locker room. Pat Riley tells that story. When you want to take that deep breath, that's when. So we go out and we win the game 3 nights in a row. He's all excited. So we get in the locker room. Tim Hardaway sitting there with his foot in a bucket because he had a sore ankle. Pat Riley's talking to the team, Alonzo Mourning, P.J. Brown, Keith Askins, Dan Marley. Okay, they were all there. And we're all standing around. So Pat Riley says to Tim Hardaway, Tim, Pat Riley reiterates the story, and he says to Tim, put your head in the bucket. Tim goes, I'm not putting my head in that bucket. So he says, Zoe, Alonzo Mourning, put your head in. He goes, I'm not putting my head in that bucket. Pat Riley takes the bucket. It still had a little ice in it. And he kneels down. He took his jacket off. He kneels down, the dapper Pat Riley now, and he puts his head in the bucket. And we're all standing around looking at this. You got 12 players. You got 3 or 4 assistant coaches. You got a few trainers in the room. And we're all looking at each other. And I'm telling you, it seemed like forever he was down there. I started to get worried because he didn't move. Then all of a sudden, he picks his head up and he goes, isn't winning great? And he puts his hair back. He's all soaking wet, okay? And then he had to go out and talk to the media. And they thought he was sweating because of the game, but they didn't realize what happened in the locker room. So it was a great story. And he was very happy that we won 3 in a row. It's very difficult to do that. I think they were all on the road as well. And the story worked. So the motivational story, the motivational things that Pat Riley told the team, they were always, on spot, and the guys got the message. And that night we went out and won our 3rd in a row. So that's the bucket story.
I love that story. Thank you so much for telling it. And we
Sure.
know this is the right version because you were there, you saw it,
there you
saw
go.
it yourself. No, Heat culture, it's all about mental toughness. You go into American Airlines Arena, and on the digital signage, you see the Heat defined as the hardest working, best conditioned, most professional, unselfish, toughest, meanest, nastiest team in the NBA.
Very good. Yeah.
Yes. Good. Yeah. Thank you. How does a franchise like the Miami Heat, that is notorious for being mentally tough and nasty and mean, how is there a balance between mental wellness and health and mental toughness?
Well, we're going back to what we talked about earlier, is that you don't just become mentally tough when you walk through the door. Mm-hmm. If you're physically fit, and that means you're ready to perform. It's the same thing as me telling the kids in the camp, look, if you don't get a good night's sleep, how are you going to perform mentally and physically well in the camp the next day? Because you're going to do a lot. We do a lot of drills. You do a lot of playing up and down the floor. Okay. And I don't think enough people realize that if you don't get enough sleep, you're not going to be mentally alert. And you're not going to get the most out of what you have. So it's a total encompassing thing with the Heat, where they develop the whole person. It's not just in the weight room. It's not just at the table when you eat. It becomes a lifestyle. They teach them about how to have a certain lifestyle. I mean, years ago in locker rooms, players used to smoke in the locker room at halftime. And you can imagine what that was like. Red Auerbach used to line up a cigar when the Celtics were going to win the game at the end of the game, back in the 60s. We've come a long way with all this stuff. Okay. And so when you're trying to develop the total person, and then when they get on the court, you demand that they play as hard as they can. They pay attention and work on the things another thing that's interesting is one of the phrases I use in camp a lot, turn a weakness into a strength. Now that could mean a lot of things. That could mean feeling better about yourself. That could mean eating properly. Okay. If that's a weakness, that you got a weakness with eating potato chips all the time at home, then don't have potato chips in your house, that sort of thing. And so turning a weakness into a strength is a very important part of the Heat culture program, because you've got to sacrifice a lot to be a top-notch basketball player. And by following the culture of the Heat, you're also becoming a top-notch person, a better person. You're becoming a better all-around person, maybe even a better dad, a better friend, okay, a better son, that sort of thing. It's all encompassing. And so I think we're starting to learn, in our society, that you shouldn't just pigeonhole what you're teaching. It encompasses a lot of things. And so that's part of what the Heat does. It started with Ron Rothstein for the first 3 years of the franchise. And then it was picked up again when Pat Riley came aboard and Mickey Arison, became the sole owner of the team, where the two of them created a culture that Coach Spoelstra has been able to carry on as a coach. Mm-hmm. And so it encompasses the whole organization. and a lot of different things that the organization does, like we're doing with the anti-bullying and what we do in the camps and what we teach and all of that sort of stuff. So it's all encompassing. It's really very rewarding and very it's an optimistic way to look at things, and it works. We've proven that it works.
For sure. I mean, it's what you're saying, and you alluded to it, that heat culture can make you a better father, a better friend. It really does transcend basketball.
No doubt.
I am never going to be a Miami Heat basketball player, but there are so many things that I can take from heat culture and apply to my life to really create a healthy lifestyle physically and mentally.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yes, which is so
That's
important.
Right.
Now, Tony, if you were to share a mental health piece of advice with the world, we've talked about sleep, kindness, what would be the most important piece of advice you would give?
Well, I will allude back to what I said earlier. I think it starts with how you feel about yourself. We have to be kind to ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes we're our own worst critic. Sometimes we're not critical enough. Sometimes we make excuses. You've got to own your own behavior. You've got to own your own way of thinking. Open your mind to a lot of different things. Be as accessible to different ideas and different ways of doing things, and just feel overall better about yourself. And it starts with the physical being, with the health, like we talked about, with the sleep and the diet and all that sort of thing. But it also means mentally you can keep an open mind, try to be kind to yourself, and keep things in perspective. One of the things we always teach in sports, things are never as good or as bad as they seem. You could be on top of the world. When you win a great game and you win a great series against somebody and you feel great, and then the next game they beat you by 30 points. You got to be able to handle both. Mm-hmm. One of the things we talk about in camp is in a game situation, going into a game against an opponent, someone's going to win, someone's going to lose. Now, if you can't handle that, then maybe it's better to get into tennis or golf, where you're not, you know what I mean? Where you're competing against yourself, really, that sort of thing, bowling. So I think it starts with yourself. You got to feel good about yourself. You got to find a happy medium on being disciplined, but yet enjoying life, and keep a perspective and a goal. And then if you reach the goal, keep making other goals. But I think when we all feel like we want to, Maya Angelou also had a great quote about people are not going to remember what you said or what you did, but they're going to certainly remember how you made them feel. Mm-hmm. And I think that's important as well. That's another quote we like to give out, Maya Angelou. So I think that's how I would answer that.
So good, Tony. So many things that we can learn from you and learn from heat culture as a whole. Thank you so much for your time today. For those who are watching, aside from notjustbasketball.com, where can they connect with you?
Well, I have an email, tfiorent@aol.com. I'm on Facebook, and I'm on Twitter. Miami Tony Heat 3X 3X World Champions. Tony Heat 3XWC on Twitter.
Love it. Let them know
all of that.
Awesome.
I love people connecting. I like to respond. One of the things I really liked when I was announcing was during the game I would read quotes. People liked it when we tweeted back during the game. You have a timeout or a halftime. I like doing that. I enjoy that. I enjoy connecting with fans.
So fun. Awesome. Well, Tony, thank you so much for your time, for your insight, for the stories that you've told. Appreciate you and your time and the heart that you have for our community.
Sure, Miss Miami. And I appreciate you getting dressed up for this. This was great.
I know, for my little work from home day. Thank you.
There you go.